A speck of dust on an ancient statue holds a story no book can tell. This video explores the captivating world of archaeological science, where microscopic material residues act as time capsules for lost artistic genius. By the end, you will see history not through artifacts alone, but through the very molecules that built them, transforming how we understand ancient innovation. How did Egyptian artisans achieve their impossible blues, and what secrets are locked in the tool marks of a Greek bronze? The answers lie in whispers of pigment and traces of wax, clues so small they were overlooked for centuries. What forgotten skill from the past do you find most compelling? That gentle brush is not for cleaning, but for listening. It collects what the eye cannot see, the silent witnesses to history's greatest creative acts. We call these clues material residues, and they are the most intimate record we have of the ancient world. Think of them not as dirt or decay, but as the physical memory of an object. They are the minute, often invisible, traces left behind at every stage of an object's life, from its first moment of creation to its final resting place in the earth. So what exactly are we looking for? The category is astonishingly broad. It can be a single, brilliant blue particle of ground lapis lazuli, escaped from an Egyptian painter's palette and nestled in the crack of a stone relief. It can be the microscopic metallic dust embedded in the groove of a marble statue, a unique fingerprint left by the specific bronze alloy of the sculptor's chisel. It can be the ghost of an organic binder, like egg yolk or tree sap, that once held pigments together, now detectable only through advanced chemical analysis. Even the patina, the colorful film that forms on bronze over centuries, is a residue, a chemical diary of its interaction with soil, air, and time. These residues offer a perspective that grand monuments and royal decrees simply cannot. Written history often speaks of kings and conquests, but it is mostly silent on the artisan's bench. It does not record the exact grind of a pigment, the specific swipe of a wax modeler's tool, or the precise temperature of a kiln on a Tuesday afternoon 3,000 years ago. Yet these are the very actions that brought art into being. Material residues capture those moments. They are the ground-level view, the unedited footage of ancient innovation. To understand what these particles are is to learn the language they speak, a dialect of chemistry and physics that tells the true story of human ingenuity, patiently waiting in the dust for its audience to arrive. That physical memory of the object becomes a tangible map under the right kind of light. The first frontier in reading these ancient whispers is not with complex chemistry, but with astonishingly powerful eyes. Optical and electron microscopes serve as our time-traveling lenses, magnifying tiny samples thousands of times to reveal a hidden world of structure and sequence. Imagine a researcher carefully preparing a sliver of paint, no larger than a grain of salt, from the edge of a centuries-old icon. Placed under the microscope, this tiny fragment transforms into a vivid landscape. Distinct layers of pigment and binder stack upon one another like the geological strata of a canyon wall, each stratum representing a deliberate artistic decision, a repair, or even the work of a different hand across time. This visual stratification is the first chapter of the artifact's story, revealing the order of operations in its creation. But the view gets even more detailed. A scanning electron microscope uses a focused beam of electrons to scan the surface, creating incredibly detailed, three-dimensional images of the microscopic terrain. With this tool, a scientist can examine the very shape and size of individual pigment particles. The morphology of a single grain of azurite blue or vermilion red tells a silent tale of the artisan's technique. Were the crystals ground to a fine, uniform powder, suggesting a desire for a perfectly smooth, luminous finish on a sacred panel? Or were they left more coarse and irregular, intentionally creating a textured, sparkling effect in the sunlight? These are not questions of mere material, but of artistic intent and aesthetic choice, visible only at this impossible scale. This microscopic mapping provides the essential foundation. It shows us the what and the how of the material's arrangement, building a precise physical blueprint of the artistic process that was, until very recently, completely invisible and utterly forgotten. Yet a blueprint only tells part of the story. To truly understand the artisan, we must move beyond the map and learn the language of the materials themselves. This is the second analytical frontier, where we decode the very chemistry of history. If microscopy shows us the structure, then spectroscopy reveals the identity. These techniques work like chemical fingerprint scanners, translating the silent composition of residues into a story we can read. One of the most powerful tools is called X-ray fluorescence, often shortened to XRF. Imagine a handheld device, no larger than a hair dryer, that you can point at an artifact without ever touching it. It sends out a harmless beam that causes the atoms in the material to respond, each element singing back with its own unique energy signature. In an instant, it can detect the presence of lead in a vibrant red pigment, telling us the artist used minium, a lead-based compound prized in the Roman world. It can confirm the copper in an Egyptian blue inlay, directly linking that brilliant hue to the specific mineral resources and advanced furnace technology of the Nile Valley. This non-invasive method transforms anonymous colored dust into a precise inventory of ancient sourcing, a testament to the vast trade networks and mineral knowledge that fueled artistic empires. But what about the ingredients that are not metallic? Ancient art was not just minerals and stone, it was built with the very stuff of life, organic materials that have often decayed beyond visual recognition. This is where another technique, Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, or FTIR, becomes our guide. This method identifies molecular bonds, the handshakes between atoms that define specific compounds. It can detect the spectral signature of beeswax in the layered surface of an encaustic portrait from Roman Egypt, confirming the ancient descriptions of this hot wax painting technique. It can find traces of a plant resin used as a protective varnish on a wooden panel, revealing not just a finishing step, but a deliberate choice for preservation and sheen. This chemical decoding is like recovering a lost recipe. A pinch of this mineral, a binder of that organic substance, a specific temperature, a particular tool. Each detection pulls a thread, connecting the artifact in a museum case back to the living world that produced it, to the beekeeper's hive and the resin tapper's forest. It turns speculation into fact, an anonymous craft into a named, understood technology. We are no longer just looking at a beautiful object, we are reading the instructions for how to make it. These recovered recipes lead us to a masterpiece of ancient chemistry, a material that defined an entire civilization's aesthetic. Egyptian faience, with its luminous turquoise blues and vibrant greens, is one of the most recognizable and cherished arts of the ancient world. For thousands of years, these small amulets, figures, and tiles have shone with a jewel-like quality, a color that seemed to capture the very essence of the Nile and the sky. The long-held assumption was straightforward, that these objects were simply glazed, much like a potter would dip a vessel in a colored liquid slip before firing. But the residues told a different, far more ingenious story. When researchers turned their microscopes and spectrometers onto fragments of faience and the crucibles used to make it, they found clues that dismantled the simple glazing theory. What they discovered in the microscopic residues was evidence of a process called cementation. The artisans were not painting or dipping. Instead, they would take a carefully shaped core of crushed quartz and fashion it into its final form, perhaps a scarab beetle or a protective amulet. This delicate quartz object was then buried, completely enveloped, in a special powdered mixture inside a sealed container. That powder was the secret. Residue analysis revealed it was a precise recipe of copper compounds for the color, an alkali like natron to act as a flux, and a small amount of lime. The container was then placed into a kiln. As the temperature rose, something magical happened at a molecular level. The powdered mixture did not melt into a conventional glaze. Instead, it generated vapors, a metallic steam that permeated the porous quartz body of the object buried within it. These copper-rich vapors penetrated deep into the material, reacting with the quartz to form a continuous colored layer not just on the surface, but throughout the very skin of the object. The brilliant blue or green was born from the inside out. The microscopic residues left in the crucibles, the unique crystalline structures seen under high magnification, all pointed to this vapor phase technology. It was a kind of alchemy, transforming earth and mineral into the color of life and divinity through invisible fumes. This revelation, written in the dust of ancient workshops, fundamentally rewrites a chapter of art history. It was not a crude painting of color onto a surface, it was a sophisticated, controlled chemical reaction. The Egyptians were not just decorators, They were early materials scientists, manipulating states of matter, gas, and solid to achieve an effect that was both durable and spiritually resonant. The color was the object, and the object was the color, fused together in a single act of transformative fire. It shows us that their brilliance was not merely in the symbolic forms they created, but in the hidden, breathtaking intelligence of how they brought those forms to life. That brilliant, vapor-born color of Egyptian faience represents one pole of ancient artistry, a mastery over materials through chemistry and fire. On the opposite end of the ancient world, another civilization perfected a different kind of alchemy, one that transformed liquid metal into figures of breathtaking dynamism and life. The serene, idealized faces of classical Greek and Roman bronze statues stand as icons of human achievement. Yet their calm surfaces are a beautiful deception, masking the violent, complex, and perilous drama of their birth. Ancient texts like Pliny's Natural History give us the broad strokes of the lost wax casting process, but they are a silent film compared to the full sensory experience. For the gritty, sweaty, roaring reality of the bronze founder's workshop, we must again turn to the residues. The process began not with metal but with beeswax. A master sculptor would craft the original model in wax over a clay core, perfecting every muscle and fold of drapery. This delicate wax original was then encased in a thick, heat-resistant shell of clay mixed with temper, a material to prevent cracking. This outer shell is called the investment mold. Once the mold was fired in a kiln, the wax inside would melt and drain out through specially designed channels, leaving behind a perfect hollow cavity in the shape of the statue. This is the lost wax. Then the moment of truth. Bronze, a molten alloy of copper and tin, sometimes with a dash of lead, was poured into that empty space at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. If the pour was successful, the mold would be broken away to reveal the glowing metal form within. For centuries, this was the understood theory. But the residues trapped inside the broken fragments of those investment molds have transformed our understanding from theory into vivid, tangible practice. When archaeologists analyze these ceramic shards, they are not just looking at old clay. Under the microscope, they find the ghosts of the process. Minute traces of the original wax model remain, absorbed into the porous clay. Spectroscopy can identify whether that wax came from bees, a specific plant source, or even a mixture, telling us about the seasonal resources available to the workshop. More telling are the inclusions found in the clay itself, the temper. Residue analysis reveals it was not just any sand or grit. Often it was chaff from threshed grain or even animal dung. These were not crude, low-quality materials. They were carefully chosen for their specific properties. Organic tempers like these would burn out during the kiln firing, creating microscopic pores in the mold wall that allowed gases to escape during the furious metal pour, preventing catastrophic bubbles and flaws in the final bronze. This was not poverty. It was sophisticated material science, using everyday waste products to solve a critical engineering problem. The metal itself leaves its own indelible signature. Tiny droplets and splashes of the bronze alloy are often found fused to the inner surface of the mold fragments. By analyzing these metallic residues, scientists can determine the exact recipe, the precise percentages of copper, tin, and lead. This alloy fingerprint is like a workshop signature. A high tin content might indicate a statue meant for strength and a golden hue, while added lead could make the molten metal more fluid, allowing for the casting of finer, more intricate details like flowing hair or delicate fingers. The presence of certain impurities can even trace the copper ore back to specific mines in Cyprus or elsewhere, mapping the economic arteries of the ancient world. By piecing together these residues, we can reconstruct the entire workshop scene. The layout of the kilns for firing the molds, the positioning of the crucibles for the pour to minimize turbulence, the skill required to coordinate a team pouring hundreds of pounds of liquid metal into a complex network of channels before it cooled. We can see regional variations, the subtle technical choices that define the bronze schools of Athens versus those of Rhodes or Rome. The serene statue in the museum is the final, silent performer. But the residues are the backstage crew, the stage directions, and the script, all preserved in microscopic dust, telling the true story of the terrifying, glorious moment when art was forged in fire. The roar of the bronze foundry gives way to the quiet, meticulous brushwork of the Roman painter. Their legacy is not cast in metal, but lives on the very walls of homes and villas, in scenes of myth and daily life that have retained a startling freshness for two. Famous frescoes of Pompeii, Herculaneum, and Rome itself present a vibrant puzzle, their colors so enduring they seem to defy the passage of time. For generations, art historians could only admire the effect. The question of how the Romans achieved such brilliance and longevity was a matter of educated guesswork. Now, the microscopic residues left in the paint layers are providing the definitive technical manuscript, revealing a sophisticated chemical artistry that was far ahead of its time. Take that iconic, deep red that adorns so many important backgrounds and borders. For years, it was known to be cinnabar, a mercury sulfide pigment mined at great cost and risk. But identifying the pigment is only the first step. The true secret to its survival lies in how it was applied. Using Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, researchers have detected the chemical fingerprint of slaked lime, or calcium hydroxide, intimately mixed with the pigment particles in the paint layer itself. This is the smoking gun for the true fresco technique, known in Italian as fresco. Here, the artist worked with immense speed and precision, applying pigments suspended only in water onto a freshly laid, damp plaster wall. As the plaster dried and cured over weeks, a remarkable chemical marriage took place. The slaked lime in the plaster migrated upward, carbonating as it absorbed carbon dioxide from the air to form a crystalline matrix of calcium carbonate. The pigment particles were not sitting on the surface, they were literally locked inside this newly formed stone. The painting did not sit on the wall, it became the wall. This is why these colors have lasted so long. They are not a vulnerable coating, they are an integral part of the mineral structure. Residue analysis allows us to see this process frozen in time at a microscopic level, confirming ancient descriptions of the practice. But the Romans were pragmatic masters, not purists. The true fresco technique demanded speed and limited the palette to minerals that could withstand the alkaline plaster. For certain details, corrections, or for using expensive organic pigments that would be destroyed by the lime, they turned to a different method. Here, residue analysis finds another story. In specific areas, scientists detect traces of organic binders like egg yolk, animal glue, or even casein from milk. These are the hallmarks of the secco or dry technique, where paint was applied to an already dry wall. These residues tell us where an artist returned to add a final flourish, a delicate highlight on a figure's robe, or the rich purple of a garment using a precious dye. The granular map provided by this analysis is astonishing. It allows us to follow the painter's workflow in a single room, seeing which broad areas were executed in a single, ambitious day of wet plaster work, and where they later paused, contemplated, and added fine detail with a different medium. This is not just chemistry, it is the recovery of a creative rhythm. This forensic understanding has a profound modern purpose. For conservators tasked with preserving these fragile masterpieces, guessing is not an option. Knowing the exact composition of the original materials, down to the specific binder used in a secco touch-up, allows them to create compatible restoration materials that will age in harmony with the ancient work. More than that, it reveals the Roman approach as one of deep empirical science. They may not have understood the molecular reactions, but through centuries of trial and observation, they perfected a system that exploited chemistry for both beauty and permanence. Their walls were not merely decorated, they were engineered. Each vibrant scene is a testament to a forgotten collaboration between the artist's vision and a quiet, profound understanding of how materials behave, a partnership now fully revealed by the silent witnesses embedded in the paint itself. While mineral residues reveal the bones of ancient craft, the soul of the work often lies in materials that were once alive. The most elusive and intimate clues are organic residues, the faded chemical ghosts of oils, waxes, gums, and proteins. These were the essential, often invisible, partners to every brilliant pigment and polished metal, serving as binders to hold paint together, as varnishes to protect and deepen a surface, or even as the base for precious perfumes. Capturing these ghosts requires a different kind of alchemy, a method that can identify the faintest molecular whisper from a substance that may have vanished 2,000 years ago. The key tool for this is a remarkable process called gas chromatography mass spectrometry, Often referred to as GCMS, think of it as the most sensitive chemical detective in the world. A tiny sample, perhaps a scraping of dust from inside a vessel or a microscopic fleck of a painted surface, is carefully heated. As it vaporizes, the machine separates the complex chemical mixture into its individual components and then identifies each one by its unique molecular weight. It is a process of disassembly and recognition, translating a long-faded scent or a dried adhesive into a precise list of ingredients. The results can be astonishingly personal. Take a small, elegant Greek perfume bottle, known as an, found in a burial context. To the naked eye, it is empty, a beautiful vessel of fired clay. But within the microscopic pores of its interior surface, GCMS analysis can detect the lingering traces of specific plant oils. The chemical signature might point to myrtle, or rose, or a prized oil derived from the iris root. Suddenly, this silent object is no longer just a container, it is a vessel for memory. We are connected to the sensory world of the individual who used it, catching the faintest echo of a scent that once defined beauty, status, or ritual for someone in a world we can only read about. This connection extends from personal adornment to the sacred. On the painted wooden panel of an Egyptian sarcophagus, the choice of binder was a practical and perhaps symbolic decision. Was the vibrant scene of gods and the afterlife fixed to the wood using animal glue, rendered from the bones or skin of creatures? Or was it a plant gum, like gum arabic tapped from an acacia tree? GCMS can answer this definitively by detecting the protein markers of collagen from an animal product or the specific sugar profiles of a plant sap. This tells us more than just a recipe. It speaks to resource availability, workshop tradition, and even cultural preference, linking the artisan's choice directly to the living landscape, the herds, and the forest that surrounded them. These organic clues are incredibly fragile, the first to decay with time, which makes their recovery all the more precious. They are profoundly human residues. They do not just tell us how something was made, they pull us into the sensory experience of its making. We can almost feel the tackiness of fresh paint on an artist's fingers as they mixed pigment with egg yolk. We sense the humid, resin-scented air of a workshop where varnish was being prepared. We glimpse the economic network that supplied rare gums and oils from distant lands. In the silent, static objects of museums, these molecular whispers restore the warmth, the smell, and the bustling, organic reality of the ancient world, reminding us that history was not just built with stone and metal, but with the very substances of life itself. The ghost of an organic perfume still lingers, a silent echo of a person long gone. But what about the echo of the hand that made the bottle? We can recover the scent, but can we recover the motion, the very physical gesture of the artisan? This is the final, most intimate frontier of residue analysis, where we move beyond materials and begin to read the body language of history. It is called Toolmark analysis, and it allows us to witness the choreography of creation, one microscopic scratch at a time. Every tool, from a flint blade to a bronze chisel to a simple wooden burnisher, leaves a unique signature on the material it touches. The angle of attack, the pressure applied, the rhythm of repeated strokes, all of these actions are encoded in the microscopic topography of the finished object. When combined with the residues those tools leave behind, the story becomes astonishingly clear. Consider a delicate ivory figurine from a prehistoric site. To the naked eye, it is a smooth, finished form. But under a high-powered microscope, its surface becomes a detailed map of its own making. Fine, parallel striations run along the curve of a limb. By analyzing the direction, depth, and spacing of these grooves, researchers can deduce the type of tool used, perhaps a sharp flint blade with a specific edge angle. But the story deepens when they find residues. Trapped within those microscopic grooves might be tiny particles of the ivory itself, mixed with a fine abrasive dust, like crushed quartz or emery. This combination tells a complete technical story. First, the rough shape was carved out with the flint blade, leaving its characteristic mark and depositing a dust of ivory. Then, to achieve that luminous smoothness, the artisan painstakingly polished the figure with a leather pad charged with an abrasive powder. The residue is the proof of that second, careful step. We are not just looking at a statue, we are watching the artisan switch tools, moving from aggressive carving to gentle, circular polishing motions. This approach transforms anonymous workshops into communities of practice. Take a group of pottery vessels found in the ruins of a Roman town. They look similar in style, but are they from the same hand? Toolmark analysis on the finished surfaces might reveal the telltale signature of a specific type of finishing rib, a curved tool used to smooth and shape the wet clay. Even more compelling, residues of a rare mineral, like a distinctive local garnet sand, might be found embedded in the microscopic pores of the pottery's surface, transferred from the artisan's tool that had been used on other local clays. This creates a forensic link. These pots were not just made in the same style, they were finished with the same physical tool, held in the same hand, in the same workshop. We are identifying a shared toolkit, and by extension, a shared working life. This moves our understanding from the abstract what to the deeply human how. It is one thing to know a bronze statue was cast using the lost wax method. It is another to analyze the fine chisel marks on its hair, the direction of the strokes, the varying pressure that created texture and shadow, and realize you are seeing the correction of a minor flaw from the casting process. You are witnessing the moment the sculptor stepped back in, tools in hand, to perfect the work. This is no longer just studying an object, it is recovering a performance. The pressure of a palm, the fatigue in a repetitive motion, the confident flourish of a final detail, these are the biometrics of forgotten genius. In these microscopic signatures, we achieve something profound, a connection that bypasses the lost name and the faded inscription. We shake hands with the craftsperson across time, feeling the echo of their effort in the very grooves they left behind. That echo of the artisan's hand connects a single workshop to a much larger world. A pigment is not just a color, it is a piece of geography. The presence of a specific mineral on an artifact is a fascinating clue, but its isotopic or trace element signature is a passport, stamped with the unique chemistry of its place of birth. This turns every fleck of color into a tracer, mapping the astonishing distances ancient materials traveled. Consider lapis lazuli, that deep, celestial blue that captivated civilizations from Egypt to Mesopotamia. For centuries, its only known source was a remote set of mines in the region of modern Afghanistan. When residue analysis identifies this mineral on a Mycenaean fresco in Greece or in the eyeshadow of an Egyptian coffin, it is not merely identifying a color. It is plotting a point on a map that stretches over 3,000 miles, tracing a journey of extraordinary hardship and value across mountains and deserts. The pigment itself becomes a witness to that epic voyage. Modern science allows us to read this passport with incredible precision. A technique called laser ablation mass spectrometry works like a microscopic archaeologist. It uses a finely tuned laser to vaporize a tiny spot on a pigment sample, smaller than the width of a human hair, and then analyzes the resulting plume of atoms. This creates an elemental fingerprint of that specific sample, a unique chemical profile that includes trace impurities and isotopic ratios locked into the mineral as it formed. This fingerprint can then be compared to geological databases of known mining sources. It is the difference between knowing a fresco is blue and knowing that particular blue came from a specific valley in Afghanistan in a specific century. This level of detail transforms our understanding of ancient economics from a vague idea of trade into a precise material ledger. The map this creates is breathtaking. Finding the chemical signature of Egyptian blue, that synthetic pigment invented along the Nile, in the wall paintings of a Roman villa in distant Britain tells a powerful story. It speaks of technology transfer, of a recipe so prized it became an export itself, or of artisans who moved across the empire carrying their knowledge and materials with them. Similarly, detecting cinnabar from the famed mines in Spain on the vibrant red walls of a house does more than confirm a luxury import. It charts a reliable, commercial sea route across the Mediterranean, a supply chain that fed the aesthetic demands of a wealthy Roman clientele. These material residues become silent proxies for entire systems of economic exchange and cultural influence. Each tiny particle of imported color is a testament to a vast, interconnected commercial world that functioned long before modern globalization. Raw materials moved across continents not as anonymous commodities, but as valued ingredients for sacred and artistic expression. The demand for a specific hue could drive exploration, foster diplomatic ties, and create fortunes. When we look at a painted wall or a decorated object through this lens, we are no longer just seeing local art. We are looking at a confluence of global resources, a snapshot of ancient markets in action. The artwork is the final destination, but the residues are the mile markers on a journey that shaped the ancient world, one brilliant color at a time. That global map of color is drawn with the very earth itself, transformed by the most elemental force of all. Fire was the ancient world's ultimate tool, and nowhere was its mastery more crucial than in the alchemy of metallurgy. The creation of artistic metalwork, from the most delicate gold filigree to the most formidable iron blade, was not a gentle craft. It was a roaring, smoky, transformative industry, and its true story is not written in the pristine finished objects we admire in museums. It is recorded in the industrial leftovers, the unglamorous slag heaps, the cracked crucibles, and the worn-out furnace fragments often discarded at a dig site. These residues are the unedited laboratory notes of the ancient metallurgist, and by reading them, we can step back into the heat and smoke of a workshop that turned raw earth into objects of power and beauty. Take a simple-looking piece of slag, the stony waste material left over after smelting ore. To the untrained eye, it is just a lump of rock, but under a microscope and through chemical analysis, it becomes a precise historical thermometer. The specific minerals and glassy phases formed within the slag reveal the exact temperatures achieved inside the furnace. Was it a relatively low-temperature process for extracting copper, or a blisteringly hot one capable of reducing iron ore? The slag tells us. Furthermore, microscopic residues of charcoal or ash trapped within it can identify the fuel source, whether it was oak for its long, steady burn, or a specific type of coal that added its own chemical signature to the process. Even the shape and porosity of the slag can indicate how the furnace was operated, whether air was blown in through ceramic tubes called to stoke the fire, and how efficiently the metal was separated from its rocky matrix. The tools of the trade themselves are rich archives. Consider a small, broken crucible, a ceramic cup used to melt metal for casting. On its inner surface, scientists might find a thin, glassy layer, the residue of the molten metal it once held. Analysis of this layer can confirm the alloy, but sometimes it reveals something more subtle. In the crucibles used for casting intricate gold jewelry, researchers have found traces of bone ash. This was not an accident. Bone ash was deliberately used as a parting agent, dusted onto the clay molds. When the molten gold was poured, the bone ash prevented the metal from sticking to the ceramic, allowing the delicate, detailed castings to be released intact. This single residue speaks volumes, a clever, practical solution born from deep empirical knowledge of material interactions. Even after an object leaves the workshop and enters the ground, its chemical conversation with the world continues. The beautiful green and blue patinas on bronze statues are not merely tarnish. They are corrosion products, and they are deeply informative. The specific compounds that form, like malachite green or azurite blue, depend on the chemistry of the soil and water surrounding the buried object. By studying these corrosion layers, scientists can deduce the composition of the ancient burial environment, whether it was acidic, alkaline, rich in certain minerals, or periodically flooded. This tells a post-depositional story, revealing how the object interacted with its resting place for centuries, and even helps conservators understand the stability of the metal today. By reverse engineering these processes from their material leftovers, we gain a profound appreciation for the proto-scientific knowledge of these ancient artisans. They were not just workers following a rote recipe, they were early chemists and engineers. They understood that different ores required different furnace designs and airflows. They knew that adding a particular mineral, like cassiterite for tin, would fundamentally change the properties of their copper, making it harder and more into the bronze we know. They mastered the precise control of temperature and atmosphere, knowing that too much oxygen could ruin a batch, or that a reducing environment was needed to pull pure metal from its rocky prison. Every lump of slag, every crucible fragment, is a testament to generations of accumulated hands-on experimentation, a lineage of knowledge passed down not in books, but in practice in the soot and sweat of the forge. They looked at a plain, colored rock and saw within it the potential for a gleaming mirror, a sacred amulet, or a king's scepter, and they possessed the fiery genius to set it free. Fire's transformative roar eventually cooled, leaving behind objects of enduring metal and stone. Yet the ancient world was not all hard edges and mineral permanence. It was also a place of softness and color, of draped fabrics that whispered with movement and glowed with dyes more precious than gold. This is the most fragile chapter of our material story, for textiles rarely survive the centuries. A linen tunic, a woolen cloak, a finely woven tapestry, these are the first casualties of time, consumed by moisture, insects, and decay. But their absence is not absolute. Like a ghostly imprint on a forgotten surface, the memory of these fabrics persists in the most unexpected places. When a bronze brooch or an iron spearhead rests against cloth in a burial for centuries, a miraculous preservation can occur. As the metal corrodes, it forms a mineral crust that grows over the adjacent fibers, creating a perfect, stony cast of the textile structure. These are called pseudomorphs, mineralized ghosts that capture the very twist of a thread, the weave pattern of a basket, or the delicate fringe of a garment's edge. Under a microscope, this stone shell reveals the textile's intimate architecture, a blueprint of a craft that has otherwise vanished into dust. But the story does not end with structure. Color is the soul of cloth, and here, chemical analysis performs its quiet magic. On the inner surface of a stone coffin, or within the corrosion products of a metal adornment, scientists can find the faintest chemical stains left by a burial shroud. Using techniques like high-performance liquid chromatography, they can separate and identify the molecular components of ancient dyes from mere micrograms of residue. A purplish stain on a fragment of calcified fiber might reveal the unique chemical signature of Tyrian purple, a dye so legendary it was worth its weight in silver. This color came not from a plant or a mineral, but from the hypobranchial gland of a specific sea snail, the murex. Tens of thousands of these snails were harvested and processed in vast, smelly industrial complexes along the Phoenician coast to produce a single gram of the dye. To find its residue on a pseudomorph in a grave in Roman Britain is to trace an invisible thread of immense luxury and status across the entire empire. Other residues speak of a more terrestrial palette. A reddish stain could be identified as madder red, derived from the roots of the plant, a common but valued dye cultivated across Europe and Asia. The detection of these color molecules does more than just add a hue to our mental image. It allows us to reconstruct the visual language of ancient societies. We begin to understand which colors were reserved for ceremony, which indicated social rank, and which were the everyday tones of the marketplace. The tools of textile creation also hold their own stories. A simple clay spindle whorl, used to weight a spindle for spinning thread, might look like an unassuming disc. But under microscopic examination, its central hole and surface can retain polished where patterns and minute residues of fibers, like flax or wool, that once twisted against it. The specific polish and the trapped microfossils can tell us not just what was spun, but how it was spun, revealing the spinner's technique and the quality of the thread they aimed to produce. From these faintest of traces, a lost world of texture and sensation slowly reweaves itself. We move beyond seeing ancient people as statues in marble and bronze. We begin to envision them in motion, draped in fabrics whose colors carried meaning, clothed in wool that kept out the chill or linen that breathed in the heat. A vibrant tapestry, long dissolved, can be understood again through the imprint it left on the floor beneath it. These material whispers restore a crucial dimension of lived experience, the rustle, the drape, and the brilliant, fleeting beauty that clothed the past in color. The vibrant colors of ancient textiles fade, but the memory of fire endures in clay. Pottery is earth itself, reshaped by human hands and then fundamentally transformed by an elemental force. A simple clay vessel is not merely dried, it is reborn in the kiln, and the residues of that fiery birth are a permanent record of the potter's most critical choices. While a shard might show us form and decoration, the microscopic world within its fabric reveals the precise conditions of its creation, turning every fragment into a chronometer and a chemical diary of a single, controlled explosion of heat in the distant past. One of the most remarkable applications of residue science in ceramics is a dating method called thermoluminescence. It works on a principle as elegant as it is powerful. Minute amounts of radioactive elements, like uranium and thorium, exist naturally in the clay and in the tiny mineral inclusions within it, such as quartz or feldspar. These elements emit a constant, low level of radiation over time. When raw clay is first fired in a kiln, the intense heat acts as a reset button, draining away any previous trapped energy from this radiation in the crystal structures of those minerals. From the moment the pot cools and leaves the kiln, the clock starts ticking again. The crystals begin to reabsorb energy from the ambient radiation in their environment. By carefully measuring the amount of light, or luminescence, released when a sample of the pottery is reheated in a laboratory, scientists can calculate how much energy has been stored since that last firing event. It is not dating the age of the clay itself, but the moment it was last subjected to the potter's fire. This technique allows us to date ceramics that lack artistic style or archaeological context, providing an absolute anchor point in time written in the silent language of physics, trapped within the ceramic matrix. Beyond telling us when, residues tell us exactly how. The final appearance of a pot, its color and hardness, was dictated by the sophisticated control of two key variables during firing: temperature and atmosphere. A potter could create dramatically different results from the same local clay. Consider the iconic red and black figure pottery of ancient Athens. That rich red background is the natural color of iron-rich clay in an oxidizing atmosphere, where plenty of oxygen circulates in the kiln. But how did they achieve those glossy, jet-black figures? The secret is in a three-stage firing process that manipulated the kiln's atmosphere with precision. Residue analysis of the black glaze shows it is the same clay slip, but fired under reducing conditions. At a critical high temperature, the potter would seal the kiln and introduce wet green wood or damp leaves, creating a smoky, oxygen-starved environment. In this reducing atmosphere, the iron oxide in the slip converts to a black, glassy form called magnetite. In the final stage, the kiln is opened again to reoxidize, turning the unslipped body back to red, but the now black slip remains sealed and unchanged. The contrast is not painted on, it is fired in, a permanent record of a carefully choreographed thermal performance. This control over atmosphere defined entire ceramic traditions. The Etruscans mastered a different effect with their ware, a distinctive sleek black pottery that mimicked the appearance of metal. Residue studies confirm it was fired in a heavily reducing atmosphere from start to finish, allowing the carbon in the smoke to impregnate the entire body of the vessel, turning it uniformly black and giving it a characteristic metallic sheen. By analyzing the degree of vitrification, the glassy transformation of the clay, and the specific mineral phases present in the ceramic body, scientists can now estimate the firing temperatures these ancient kilns achieved, often with surprising accuracy, revealing a widespread understanding of high-heat technology. Even a pot's position in the kiln can be deduced from forensic clues. Potters used stacks and shelves to fire multiple items at once, and the conditions varied from top to bottom, from the center to the edges where flames licked. Residues of kiln furniture, like small clay stilts or spacers, sometimes remain fused to a pot's foot or side. More subtly, patterns of ash deposits or localized color variations on a vessel's surface can act as a thermal map. A patch of darker discoloration might indicate where the pot was shielded from direct flame by another, while a splash of natural ash glaze could reveal where it was directly exposed to the drifting embers. This turns a broken shard into a snapshot of the kiln's loading pattern, a glimpse of the workshop on its busiest day. Through these residues, we move beyond appreciating the pot as a finished art object. We stand beside the potter, feeling the heat of the kiln mouth, watching the color of the flames, and sharing in the tense, hopeful wait to see if the fire has delivered a masterpiece or a pile of broken dreams. That single snapshot of a kiln's busy day is just one pixel in a much larger picture. The ultimate revelation from these microscopic whispers does not come from any one technique, but from the conversation between them all. The true power of residue analysis lies in synthesis, in the moment when data from multiple scientific disciplines converges to form a single, coherent narrative. An archaeologist might unearth a fragment of a painted wall. A materials scientist can then examine it with microscopy to see its layered structure, use spectroscopy to identify its exact chemical makeup, and apply isotopic analysis to trace the geological origin of its pigments. Separately, each of these findings is a fascinating fact, but together they start talking to each other, and that interdisciplinary dialogue transforms isolated data points into a holistic reconstruction of a lost moment. Consider a vibrant blue tile from a Roman villa. Chemical analysis confirms the pigment is Egyptian blue, that synthetic marvel invented along the Nile. That is the first clue, a signature of advanced technology. Then microscopy reveals how it was applied, showing a thin, uniform layer skillfully brushed onto a prepared surface. This tells us about the painter's technique, their control and intention. Finally, isotopic analysis of the copper within that blue pigment might trace its origin not to Egypt, but to the famed copper mines of Cyprus. Now the story deepens dramatically. We are not looking at an Egyptian import, but at a Roman object made with a borrowed Egyptian recipe, using raw materials sourced from a different part of the Mediterranean entirely. This synthesis builds a comprehensive narrative of trade, technology transfer, and local artistic execution. It shows us that the recipe for Egyptian blue had traveled, perhaps with artisans or in technical manuals, and was being produced locally using available resources. It speaks of an empire connected not just by goods, but by knowledge, where a chemical formula could become as valuable an export as the pigment itself. This collaborative model is reshaping entire historical questions. Take the mystery of a particular type of glass bead found across Europe, dating to a period of great migration and cultural exchange. Using laser ablation to study its chemistry, researchers can determine it is a soda-lime glass, typical of the Mediterranean. Electron microscopy might reveal specific manufacturing marks, like the twist of a tool used to wind the molten glass onto a mandrel. But when they analyze the strontium isotopes within the glass, which reflect the geological signature of the lime used as a stabilizer, the story splits. Some beads match the limestone beds of the Levant, the traditional glass-making heartland. Others, identical in appearance and major chemistry, carry an isotopic signature pointing to limestone sources in Western Europe. The synthesis of these data streams reveals something astonishing, not a simple trade in finished beads from the East, but the possible migration of the glass-making knowledge itself. Skilled artisans may have traveled, carrying their core recipes with them, but adapting to local raw materials, creating a hybrid product that blended tradition with new resources. This is the grand narrative that emerges from the synthesis of whispers. The archaeologist provides the context, the when and where of the object. The materials scientist provides the how and the what of its composition. Together, they answer the most profound question, the why. Why was this material chosen? Why was this technique used here? The answers paint a picture of ancient innovation that was dynamic, adaptable, and deeply interconnected. It moves us beyond labeling artifacts as simply Greek or Roman or Celtic, and allows us to see the fluid exchange of ideas that flowed beneath those cultural labels. In this interdisciplinary space, a fleck of paint is no longer just a color. It is a diplomat, a traveler, and a teacher, all at once. That interdisciplinary synthesis paints a vibrant new picture of the past, but it asks something of the artifacts themselves. Every sample taken, every microscopic examination, is a form of interaction with an object that has survived for. The quest for knowledge, therefore, carries a profound responsibility, a need to balance our curiosity with an unwavering duty to preserve. The guiding principle is simple: to learn as much as possible while altering the artifact as little as possible. This ethical framework has driven the field toward a quiet revolution in non-invasive and micro-invasive methods, where technology acts as a delicate probe, not a disruptive force. Imagine a researcher in a museum gallery standing before a priceless Renaissance panel painting. In the past, understanding its pigments might have required taking a physical sample, a tiny but permanent removal. Today, they can use a portable XRF spectrometer, a handheld device that looks like a scientific scanner from a future era. They simply hold it a few centimeters from the painting's surface, and within seconds, it delivers a complete elemental analysis of the pigments beneath, all without a single touch. This analysis preserves the artwork's integrity completely, allowing for the study of pieces that are too fragile, too large, or too sacred to ever be sampled. The technology grows even more remarkable with tools like imaging. This process involves capturing hundreds of images of an object, each at a different wavelength of light, from the visible into the infrared. When processed, this data cube creates a detailed chemical map across the entire surface. On a vast medieval mural, conservators can use this map to identify areas of original pigment, later restorations, and even underlying sketches, all without ever applying a chemical test or taking a scrape. It reveals the artist's changes, their second thoughts, and the painting's history of repair in stunning, colorful detail, a revelation achieved through light alone. Of course, some questions require physical evidence. When understanding the exact layering of a paint film or the composition of a metal alloy's core is essential, sampling is still necessary. But here, the scale has shifted to the microscopic. A microsample is not a chip or a fragment, it is often a few grains of material, smaller than a pinhead, carefully collected from an existing crack, a damaged edge, or an area already requiring conservation. Using a fine surgical blade under a microscope, a conservator might lift a sample weighing mere micrograms. This tiny speck, invisible to the naked eye, contains enough material for a full suite of analyses, from microscopy to DNA testing on organic binders. The goal is to leave no visible trace, to ensure that the scientific intervention is itself a part of the object's careful stewardship. This ethical evolution reflects a deeper change in perspective. We no longer see artifacts merely as sources of data to be mined. They are recognized as unique, non-renewable documents of human history, each with its own biography and its own right to endure. The technologies we develop are judged not just by their power, but by their gentleness. Every non-invasive scan and every responsibly taken microsample is a promise to the future, a commitment that our generation's search for understanding will not compromise the ability of generations to come to experience, study, and be inspired by these very same objects. We are learning to listen to the whispers of the past without raising our voice. This promise of preservation now opens a door to a new kind of encounter. The precise chemical data recovered from residues, those inventories of pigments and binders, are more than just lines in a scientific paper. They have become the foundational code for a digital renaissance, a virtual archaeology that breathes color and life back into faded forms. This is where the microscope meets the pixel, transforming empirical evidence into an immersive experience of the past as it was meant to be seen. We are all familiar with the classical ideal, the gleaming white marble of Greek and Roman statues that has defined Western aesthetics for centuries. But residue analysis has proven this to be a profound misconception, an accident of history where the paint simply wore away. The truth is that those serene faces and heroic bodies were once ablaze with color. Lips were painted a vivid red, robes shimmered with an azurite blue, and hair might have been detailed with gilded highlights. Knowing a pigment's chemical identity is one thing, but understanding its exact hue, its transparency, and how it interacted with a binder like egg tempera allows digital artists to work with unprecedented accuracy. They can scan a statue's surface, map the microscopic traces of color residue still clinging to its contours, and then, using software, apply virtual pigments with the correct luminosity and texture. The result is not a fanciful artist's impression, but a scientifically informed reconstruction. A goddess steps out of the monochrome past, her polychrome glory restored, and we are suddenly face to face with the shocking, vibrant reality of ancient art. This digital rebirth extends from sculpture to the walls of lost rooms. Take a fragmentary fresco from a Roman villa, its narrative scene interrupted by gaps and cracks. Traditional restoration might involve careful infilling, but it is always speculative. A virtual approach, guided by residue data, changes the game. Scientists can analyze the pigments and brushwork techniques on the existing fragments. They can identify the specific red used for a border or the particular green mix for a landscape element. This information allows algorithms to extrapolate patterns, and when combined with art historical knowledge of compositional conventions, digitally propose the most probable completion of missing sections. The full narrative scene blossoms back into view on a screen, the story once told to ancient visitors now readable again. We are not just seeing a damaged artifact, we are witnessing the restoration of its original communicative power, its ability to tell a myth or depict a moment of daily life. The ultimate value of these virtual models lies in their power to bridge an immense experiential gap. A weathered, partial object in a museum case can feel distant, a relic separated from us by time and decay. It is difficult to connect emotionally with a headless statue or a patch of faded plaster. But a high-fidelity digital reconstruction, grounded in material evidence, acts as a translator. It closes that gap, allowing anyone to experience the artifact as its creators and original audience intended, to feel the intended impact of its colors and composition. This makes the past vividly, immediately present. Museums are now employing these tools to create interactive displays and augmented reality experiences. A visitor can hold a tablet over a bronze figurine and see it transform on screen, its original gilding sparkling, its inlaid eyes gleaming with stone and glass. It transforms observation into revelation. This synergy between hard science and digital artistry represents a profound shift in how we share heritage. We are moving beyond presenting the past as it has come down to us, and towards reconstructing the past as it truly was, in all its intended brilliance. The whispers of Residues are no longer just clues for experts. They have become the voice that guides a pixels, letting us all see with new eyes. That digital restoration is a testament to the power of science, but the path to clarity is rarely a straight line. The very nature of these microscopic clues presents a unique set of challenges, a reminder that even our most advanced tools must navigate a landscape of uncertainty. One of the most persistent hurdles is contamination, the introduction of material that has nothing to do with the original artifact. Centuries of handling, burial in complex soils, and most significantly, modern restoration efforts can all leave their own chemical fingerprints. A conservator in the 19th century might have used a shellac-based varnish to brighten a painting, or a wax to consolidate a fragile ceramic. Today, when we analyze a sample, the signals from that well-intentioned repair can be indistinguishable from an ancient binder, leading to a false conclusion about the original technique. The science must therefore become a form of forensic discrimination, learning to separate the historical signal from the noise of its long journey to the present. Time itself is the great eraser, especially for the most delicate materials. Organic residues, the oils, waxes, and proteins that speak so personally of ancient life, are the most vulnerable. They break down, evaporate, or are consumed by microorganisms. What we detect today may only be a degraded fragment of the original substance, a shadow of its former chemical self. This degradation can make signals ambiguous. A complex mixture detected in a paint sample might represent the artist's original recipe of egg yolk and pigment, or it could be the result of centuries of chemical reactions between the paint, the air, and moisture in the wall. Determining which is which requires not just identifying the molecules present, but understanding the pathways of decay, a puzzle where the pieces are constantly changing shape. Perhaps the most humbling limitation is the problem of absence. The lack of a specific residue does not definitively prove that a technique or material was not used. Some ancient processes were remarkably clean. A master stone carver using perfectly sharpened bronze chisels on hard granite might leave almost no metallic dust behind. A painter using a pure, well-ground mineral pigment with water on fresh plaster might leave no trace of an organic binder for our instruments to find. We can only build our knowledge from what survives, which means our picture of the past is inherently shaped by what time has chosen to preserve, not by everything that once existed. This demands a crucial intellectual humility. Every detection is a positive data point, but every non-detection is simply an unanswered question. These challenges are not weaknesses in the science, they are its essential context. Acknowledging them is fundamental to integrity. It transforms the work from a simple hunt for answers into a careful, interpretative dialogue with the evidence. A researcher must weigh multiple lines of inquiry, cross-reference findings with archaeological context, and always consider alternative explanations. A single blue particle could be lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, or it could be a speck of modern ultramarine paint from a conservator's brush that drifted onto the artifact in a lab 50 years ago. The story is built not on a single whisper, but on a chorus of consistent data, where microscopy, chemistry, and archaeology all sing in harmony. This rigorous, self-critical approach ensures that each revelation, each restored color or identified trade route is a sturdy piece of a much larger mosaic. The final image may have gaps, but the pieces we do have are placed with confidence, reminding us that understanding the past is not about finding final answers, but about learning to ask better questions of the silent witnesses that remain. These challenges remind us that our knowledge is built on fragments, but those fragments carry a profound human signature. The ultimate destination of this entire scientific journey is not a laboratory report, but a person. Every pigment choice, every tool mark, every microscopic adjustment is a physical echo of an ancient individual's decision. We sift through the residues of their materials to find the residues of their minds, their hands, and their daily lives. Think of a single, clear fingerprint pressed into the damp clay of a pottery vessel before it was fired, perfectly preserved for. That is not an accident of production, it is a moment of contact, a biometric signature left by a potter lifting their work. Or consider the discovery of a single, delicate hair, perhaps from a brush, embedded in the painted surface of a wooden coffin. These are not just clues to technique, they are intimate, tangible connections to the very individuals who performed the work. They collapse the distance between then and now in a way no royal inscription ever could. This perspective fundamentally changes how we view ancient art. We move beyond seeing a statue or a pot as merely a product of its culture, a generic output of the Romans or the Egyptians. Instead, we begin to appreciate it as the dynamic result of a creative individual solving a series of practical problems. That artisan had technical goals. They needed to source a specific clay that would fire to the right hardness without cracking, a decision we can trace through residue analysis of local versus imported materials. They had an aesthetic vision. The choice to grind a pigment more finely for a smoother finish, or to apply a translucent wash of color for a specific effect, speaks to an artistic intention we can now perceive. Each artifact becomes a frozen moment of problem solving, a testament to the skill and ingenuity required to translate an idea into a physical object with the tools and materials at hand. By reconstructing their processes so meticulously, we democratize history. For too long, the narrative of the past has been dominated by the voices of emperors, generals, and scribes, the individuals whose names were carved in stone. The artisans, the true builders of the visual and material world, remained anonymous. Residue analysis gives them a voice. It allows us to recognize their expertise, to see the variations in skill between different workshops, and to trace the lineage of a technical innovation as it passed from one skilled hand to another. We celebrate not just the patron who commissioned a great temple, but the countless unnamed hands who mixed the mortar, cast the bronze fittings, and painted the walls. Their legacy is written in the microscopic strata of their work. This reconnection is the most powerful outcome of reading material whispers. It transforms our museums from halls of beautiful objects into archives of human experience. When you stand before a vibrant fresco, you are not just looking at a scene from mythology. You are witnessing the culmination of a painter's long day, the quick decisions made as the plaster dried, the specific brush they held. When you examine a polished stone seal, you are feeling the weight of the countless repetitions it took to master the carving of such intricate detail. The science gives us the blueprint, but the human element gives it a soul. We are no longer studying a distant, monolithic past. We are learning from individuals, from craftspeople whose intelligence, creativity, and sheer perseverance shaped the world they lived in and left a durable record of their presence, patiently waiting in the dust for us to finally understand. The biological fabric of ancient production holds its own quiet language, written not in minerals or metals, but in the very molecules of life. This is the emerging frontier, where archaeology converges with cutting-edge biology to read the most intimate residues of all ancient proteins and genetic material. These whispers offer a resolution so fine, they can identify not just a material, but the individual organism that supplied it, opening a window into the living networks that fueled ancient craft. Imagine a fragment of a parchment scroll, its surface inscribed with faded ink. Traditional analysis might tell us the ink is carbon-based, but new, ultrasensitive techniques can now detect minute traces of collagen, the primary protein in skin, that have migrated from the parchment itself into the ink lines. By sequencing these ancient protein fragments, scientists can determine the specific animal species from which the parchment was made. Was it calfskin, prized for its smoothness, or perhaps sheep or goat skin, more readily available? This moves beyond understanding a writing surface to understanding a pastoral economy, the selection of animals for their skins, and the very first step in the life of a document. The implications extend to vibrant color. A vat used for dyeing wool leaves behind more than just stains. In the crusty residues at the bottom of such a vessel, researchers can now search for ancient microbial DNA. The bacterial communities that thrived in that nutrient-rich, fermenting dye bath were not contaminants, they were essential workers. For certain prized dyes like the imperial purple from murex snails, fermentation was a crucial part of the process to release the color. Identifying the specific bacterial species present can tell us about the controlled, almost recipe-like conditions the dyers maintained, their unwitting mastery of a microbial ecosystem to achieve a consistent, brilliant hue. It speaks to an empirical understanding of a living process. This lens also brings a new dimension to workshop life, a concept we might call ancient hygiene. Residues on grinding stones, in mortar bowls, or even in the water channels of a pottery workshop can preserve genetic traces of the materials processed there, from specific plants to animal fats. But they might also preserve the microbiome of the workers themselves, or evidence of food consumed on site. While handled with the utmost ethical care, such data could sketch a more holistic picture of the workshop as a lived-in space, where craft, daily life, and the natural environment were inextricably linked. The tools for this work are becoming astonishingly sensitive, capable of working with truly infinitesimal samples. They promise to reveal chapters of the ancient artistic manual that are currently blank pages. We could move from knowing a pigment contains an iron compound to identifying the exact species of plant from which a medieval lake pigment was derived, by detecting its unique protein signature. We might understand the seasonal timing of ivory carving by analyzing residual proteins that indicate the age or even the diet of the elephant. Each detection pulls the thread, connecting the artifact back to a specific place, a specific season, and a specific life. This is not merely analyzing objects, it is beginning to reconstruct the living ecology of innovation, where human creativity was a dialogue with the biological world in its most intimate detail. This molecular conversation between past and present quietly rewrites the textbooks. For generations, the story of art's evolution was told through a lens of style and patronage, a narrative built on the visible surface. Residue analysis introduces a new, foundational layer to that story, one written in chemistry and physics. It demands that art history become a dialogue between the connoisseur's eye and the scientist's spectrometer, where a broad-stroke description of technique is no longer sufficient. We must now speak with precision. It is not enough to say a Roman painter used fresco. We can specify they used the fresco method on this wall, and the secco technique for those delicate highlights, revealing their workflow in a single afternoon's labor. This granular data transforms vague chapters into detailed technical manuscripts. This shift profoundly alters how we understand artistic change itself. The emergence of a new style or aesthetic is rarely just a sudden burst of creative genius. Often, it is intimately tied to the availability of new materials or the diffusion of a technical secret. The radiant blues of medieval stained glass, for instance, were not merely an artistic choice. They became possible only with specific advances in glass chemistry and the control of furnace temperatures, technological innovations that residue analysis can pinpoint in workshop debris. The spread of the lost wax casting technique across the ancient Mediterranean was not just an idea traveling, it was a complex package of knowledge about clay recipes, alloy mixtures, and firing schedules, a toolkit that can be traced through the chemical fingerprints left in mold fragments and slag. Artistic revolution, it turns out, is frequently a materials revolution in disguise. Perhaps one of the most disruptive implications is for the practice of attribution. For centuries, experts have grouped works and assigned them to masters or regions based on stylistic analysis, the curve of a line, the treatment of a face. Residue analysis provides an independent chemical testimony that can confirm, challenge, or refine these attributions. Two statues may look stylistically similar, but if the alloy of one contains trace elements from Cypriot copper mines and the other shows signatures of Spanish ore, they likely emerged from different economic and workshop networks despite their visual kinship. Conversely, objects that look dissimilar to the human eye might share an identical chemical fingerprint in their pigment or clay body, silently proclaiming a common origin in a specific atelier. This scientific lens does not replace connoisseurship, but it holds it to a new standard of evidence, separating the hand of the artist from the hand of a clever imitator or a regional school. The ultimate result is a richer, more nuanced understanding of cultural evolution. Art history ceases to be merely a chronology of beautiful forms and becomes a tangible record of human problem-solving and exchange. When we see the Egyptian blue pigment on a Roman wall, we are no longer just noting an imported color. We are witnessing the flow of a chemical recipe across an empire, a testament to the value placed on technical knowledge. The how of a thing's creation deeply informs the why it looks the way it does. This evidence-based approach grounds our appreciation in the gritty reality of innovation, in the trials, errors, and triumphs of countless unnamed artisans. Their legacy is no longer confined to the shapes they left behind, but is now audible in the quiet, persistent voice of the materials they so masterfully commanded. This chemical testimony from the past does more than rewrite history books, it actively safeguards the future. Every insight gleaned from a microscopic residue translates directly into a conservation strategy, a way to protect these irreplaceable objects for generations yet to come. Think of it this way: before this science, restoring an ancient artifact was often an educated guess. A conservator might see a flaking painted surface and choose a modern synthetic adhesive to secure it, only to discover years later that the new material had reacted badly with the ancient one, causing more damage than it prevented. Today, that guesswork is replaced with precise knowledge. By understanding the exact composition of the original materials, conservators can make choices that are compatible, that support the artifact's inherent chemistry rather than fighting against it. If analysis reveals that a 2,000-year-old wooden panel was sealed with a specific tree resin, modern experts can source or synthesize a material with similar properties for any necessary reinforcement, ensuring the repair ages in harmony with the original. This is conservation guided by the artifact's own blueprint. The practical applications are beautifully specific. Take that ancient vase painted with a delicate plancum binder. Without residue analysis, a well-meaning conservator might use a common aqueous cleaning solution. Water, however, could reactivate that ancient gum, causing the vibrant pigments to bleed or the painted layer to lift entirely from the surface. Armed with the knowledge of the original organic binder, the conservator instead selects a cleaning agent that targets grime without disturbing that historical adhesive. The vase is cleaned safely, its original artistic integrity preserved, because we listened to the chemical instructions left behind by its maker. Similarly, inside the porous stone of a medieval sculpture, residue analysis might detect the presence of damaging salts, like chlorides or nitrates, that migrated in from the soil during burial. These salts are hygroscopic, meaning they attract moisture from the air, causing them to repeatedly crystallize and expand inside the stone's microscopic pores. This cycle is a silent, destructive force, slowly turning solid marble to powder from within. Identifying the specific corrosive compounds allows for targeted poultice treatments, where special clay or paper pulp is applied to gently draw the salts out of the stone, halting the decay at its source. The treatment is no longer a broad assault, but a precise medical intervention based on a clear diagnosis. This approach transforms conservation from a reactive practice into a proactive stewardship. It provides what we might call a material biography for each object, a record of its creation, its life, and its ailments. This biography allows conservators to predict how an artifact will behave in different environmental conditions. Knowing the exact metal alloy of a bronze statue, down to its trace lead content, helps predict its susceptibility to a particular type of corrosion called bronze disease, and informs the ideal humidity level for its display case. Understanding the layered structure of a fresco, as revealed by microscopic cross-sections, guides decisions on climate control to prevent the different layers from expanding and contracting at different rates, which causes cracking. In this way, the silent whispers of residues become the most authoritative conservation manual imaginable, authored not by a modern expert, but by the original artists and the long passage of time itself. Our role shifts from being interpreters who impose solutions to becoming careful listeners and faithful guardians, using advanced science to honor and extend the life of works that have already endured for. The goal is no longer just to fix what is broken, but to understand an object so deeply that we can create the conditions for its continued survival, ensuring that these material conversations between past and present never fall silent. This guardianship guided by science need not be confined to experts in white coats. The fascinating detective work of residue analysis holds a remarkable key to public engagement, inviting everyone to become part of the story. Museums around the world are harnessing this potential, transforming quiet galleries into interactive laboratories of discovery. Imagine standing before a display case, not just reading a label, but using it to virtually peel back the layers of a Renaissance painting. With a swipe of your finger, you can watch as a digital representation of the artwork separates into its individual stratigraphy, revealing the underpainting, the corrections, and the final glazes, all explained through the lens of actual scientific data recovered from the piece. Interactive kiosks can simulate the experience of using a portable XRF spectrometer, letting visitors aim a virtual beam at different parts of an ancient bronze and see the real elemental readouts appear, demystifying exactly how we know what an object is made of. This transforms abstract science into a tangible, thrilling process. The engagement extends beyond museum walls into the realm of citizen science. Universities and research projects are beginning to crowdsource the meticulous work of pattern recognition. Thousands of high-resolution photographs of pottery shards can be uploaded to an online platform. Volunteers from anywhere in the world can then be trained to identify and tag specific tool marks, wear patterns, or decorative motifs. This collective human effort can process vast datasets far more quickly than a single researcher, helping to map regional styles and workshop practices on an unprecedented scale. When you explain that a harmless laser beam can reveal the geological passport of a pigment, or that a microscope can show the polish left by a spinner's thumb on a clay whorl, you are not just sharing a fact. You are sharing a method, a way of seeing. This demystification is powerful. It breaks down the barrier between the expert and the enthusiast, between the pristine display and the gritty, fascinating work that brought it to light. People are no longer just passive observers of a finished historical narrative. They become active participants in the ongoing investigation, gaining a stake in the cultural heritage they are helping to uncover. A child who uses a simulated spectrometer in a museum is not just learning about chemistry, they are learning to ask new questions of every old object they see. An online volunteer tagging pottery marks is contributing directly to a global research project, adding a piece to a puzzle that spans continents. This collaborative model shows that history is not a closed book sitting on a shelf. It is an open case file, a living discipline where new chapters are being written every day, not only by in labs, but by curious minds everywhere. The story of the past becomes a shared endeavor, a continuous conversation between the silent witnesses of antiquity and the collective curiosity of the present. A pigment's price tag is often written in its chemistry. When a trace of ultramarine blue, ground from lapis lazuli that journeyed from the mountains of Afghanistan, is found on a small, otherwise humble wooden amulet in a Roman provincial town, it tells an economic story louder than any ledger. This was not a casual choice. The presence of such an extravagantly expensive imported material on a modest object forces us to reconsider its value. Perhaps it was a commission piece for a wealthy local patron wanting to display status through art, or a devotional object created for a special, one-time ritual where no expense was spared. The residue acts as a financial receipt, marking the object as a luxury item in its original context, and hinting at the invisible flow of capital that directed precious resources towards specific artistic acts. It draws a direct line between global trade networks and individual aesthetic desire. Scale reveals another layer of economic reality. When archaeologists analyze hundreds of pottery fragments from a single site and find identical standardized residue patterns, the same clay body, the same glaze chemistry, the same tooling marks on the bases, they are seeing the fingerprints of organized industry. This is not the work of a lone potter in a backyard kiln. This points to large, centralized workshops with division of labor. One person prepared the clay, another threw the vessels on a fast wheel, a third applied the slip, and specialists managed the large, multi-chambered kilns. The residues become evidence of an ancient assembly line, optimized for volume and consistency to meet market demand, whether for the tableware of a growing city or the transport amphorae that carried olive oil across the sea. This standardization is the material signature of an economic system capable of mass production. Even the choice of fuel leaves an economic residue. Analyzing the ash and carbon deposits in the remains of ancient kilns can tell us what was burned to achieve the necessary fire. Did the workshop use readily available but quick-burning straw, indicating a small-scale seasonal operation? Or did they have the resources to procure dense, long-burning oak or charcoal, a more expensive but efficient fuel that allowed for longer, hotter, and more controlled firings? The fuel signature speaks to the workshop's operational budget, its access to managed woodland or trade routes, and its level of technical ambition. A kiln fired with high-quality charcoal was a significant capital investment, one that implies a stable, well-funded enterprise expecting a return. Together, these clues allow us to map the social hierarchy of ancient making. We can begin to distinguish between the royal atelier, with its stores of imported lapis, cinnabar, and cedar resin, supplied by state-sponsored trade, and the local village potter who used the clay from the riverbank and colored slips from local iron oxides. One served an empire's elite, the other a community's daily needs. Residue analysis thus paints a detailed picture of ancient industry and commerce. It shows us that art was never separate from the market. It was a commodity, a product of resource management, labor organization, and economic calculation. The beauty we admire was always, in part, a function of cost, access, and the relentless practical logic of supply and demand that shaped the creative world just as it shapes our own. The grandest monuments were built to defy time itself, yet the most enduring records of their creation were never meant to be seen. This is the quiet paradox at the heart of our journey. The pyramids were designed as eternal houses for the departed, their polished limestone facades meant to gleam under the sun for all time. But the true story of their construction does not live in those massive blocks. It whispers from the microscopic flecks of copper or embedded in the cracks of stone chisels, telling us the exact source of the metal that shaped them. The colossal bronze statues of emperors were cast to project power across centuries, but their makers left their most personal signature in the wood-ash temper of a broken mold, a practical solution for venting gases that no one thought would be studied later. The intentional record is one of ambition and statement. The accidental residue is one of process and problem-solving. One speaks to how a civilization wanted to be remembered. The other reveals how it actually worked, day by dusty day in the heat of the moment. This inversion forces us to reconsider what cultural memory truly is. We have long equated permanence with the monumental, with the inscribed steel and the carved temple frieze. These are the official narratives, curated and controlled. But history, in its messy, human fullness, has a way of writing itself in the margins. It is preserved in the unintended, in the material witnesses to ordinary action. The painter mixing a batch of pigment was not thinking about leaving a chemical time capsule for the future. The potter stoking a kiln was focused on the firing, not on creating a slag sample that would one day reveal the precise temperature of their furnace. Their goals were immediate, practical, artistic. The record they left was a byproduct, a silent byproduct of their focused labor. And yet, it is this incidental evidence that now offers the most unguarded, unfiltered access to their world. It is a record without an agenda, one that cannot lie about the composition of an alloy or the origin of a dye. This challenges a fundamental assumption about how we know the past. We are accustomed to learning from texts, from art, from architecture, all of which are products of conscious intention. But here, we learn from dust. We learn from decay. The very processes of fading, corrosion, and fragmentation create the evidence we seek. The vibrant fresco loses its color, but in that loss, the chemical bonds of its binder are exposed for analysis. The bronze statue corrodes, but that patina holds a diary of its burial environment. The organic glue fails, but its degraded proteins can still be sequenced. In a profound sense, the ephemeral has become the eternal. The things meant to vanish, the waste products, the trial runs, the worn-out tools, have outlasted their original purpose to become the primary documents. This shifts our role as interpreters. We are not just reading a story that was written for us. We are piecing together a narrative from clues that were never meant to be read. We are forensic listeners, tuning our instruments to hear the faintest echoes of actions whose sound faded thousands of years ago. Every time a new technique allows us to detect a single molecule of a forgotten perfume or map the wear on a stone tool at a nanometer scale, we are reminded of the staggering complexity of the past. Each object is a universe of interconnected decisions, resources, and motions. And with every discovery, we are also confronted with the humility of our enterprise. We build our understanding from fragments, knowing that for every whisper we hear, countless others have been lost forever to the relentless silence of time. The artists and artisans could never have envisioned us, their distant audience, scrutinizing the residue of their wax or the grind of their pigment. They left behind a legacy in form and function, but they also, quite accidentally, left behind the blueprint of their genius, waiting in the dust for a future that would finally learn how to read it. That blueprint of genius was never confined to a single river valley or empire. To truly appreciate the scope of ancient innovation, we must widen our lens and listen to the material whispers from every corner of the globe. By applying residue analysis to artifacts from vastly different civilizations, we can conduct a remarkable experiment, comparing the technological path taken by cultures separated by oceans and mountains. Did the brilliant glazes of ancient Mesopotamia and the luminous lacquers of China emerge from a shared human instinct to transform earth with fire, or do they tell stories of unexpected connection? This comparative approach builds a worldwide map of ingenuity, revealing both our universal creative drive and the beautifully diverse solutions it inspired. Consider the quest for a perfect, impermeable, and colorful surface. In the workshops of ancient Mesopotamia, artisans perfected some of the world's first true glazes, creating a glassy coating for their bricks and vessels. Residue studies of these glazes show they were based on a soda-lime silica chemistry, using plant ash as a source of alkali. They learned to mix in copper compounds for a brilliant turquoise or cobalt for a deep, mysterious blue. Now, travel across the world to the courts of ancient China. Here, artisans were mastering an entirely different medium, lacquer. This was not a mineral glaze, but an organic marvel, the sap of the lacquer tree. Analysis of ancient lacquerware reveals a complex technology of harvesting, purification, and application in dozens of thin, carefully dried layers, often colored with minerals like cinnabar red or orpiment yellow. Both civilizations sought a durable, decorative finish. One looked to the mineral kingdom and the chemistry of the kiln, the other to the living forest and the patience of slow curing. Their solutions were technologically distinct, born from their unique environments and material resources, yet they answered a similar human desire to beautify and protect. Sometimes, however, the residues reveal a thread of connection so long it stretches across continents. The story of cobalt blue is a classic tale of global trade written in chemistry. In Persia, artisans had access to rich deposits of cobalt ore, which they used to create a stunning, stable blue for their ceramics and glass. The unique elemental fingerprint of this Persian cobalt, with its specific trace amounts of manganese and arsenic, acts like a chemical signature. Now examine a piece of brilliant blue and white porcelain from Ming Dynasty China, centuries later. For a long time, it was assumed this iconic blue was a purely Chinese innovation. But residue analysis tells a different story. When scientists used laser ablation to study the cobalt in early Ming blue and white ware, they found that unmistakable Persian signature. The data is clear. The prized cobalt pigment was imported, traveling along the Silk Road as a raw material. Later, Chinese potters would discover and exploit their own domestic cobalt sources, which have a different chemical fingerprint, but those first, groundbreaking pieces were colored with a pigment that whispered of distant Persian mines. This is not just trade in finished goods, it is the movement of a key technological ingredient, a piece of a recipe that sparked an artistic revolution in a new land. These comparisons allow us to map the diffusion of ideas with new precision. The concept of lost wax metal casting, for instance, appears in ancient Anatolia, Greece, West Africa, and, by comparing the residues within mold fragments and the alloys used from these different regions, we can ask profound questions. Do the technical details, like the specific clay recipes for the molds or the choice of organic tempers, show a common lineage suggesting the spread of knowledge? Or do they show independent invention, where different cultures arrived at a similar brilliant solution to the problem of casting complex shapes? The residues provide the forensic evidence to test these historical models. Similarly, the use of iron oxide pigments for reds and yellows is a global phenomenon, but the specific minerals chosen and the binders mixed with them, revealed through residue analysis, create a localized signature of practice, a regional accent in a universal language of color. This global perspective fosters a more inclusive and connected art history. It moves us beyond viewing civilizations in isolated silos, celebrating only the masterpieces of the familiar Western canon. Instead, we build an interconnected narrative of human creativity. We can see how the Maya developed vivid mural paints using local plant gums and rare minerals like Maya blue, a unique organic-inorganic hybrid pigment, while on the other side of the world, Byzantine mosaicists were achieving similar luminous effects by setting glass tesserae into plaster. Both sought to capture divine light in sacred spaces through entirely different material means. By placing these technological achievements side by side, we appreciate not a hierarchy of progress, but a dazzling spectrum of adaptation. It highlights the incredible diversity of paths taken to solve the same fundamental challenges of expression. The drive to create, to leave a mark, to make the functional beautiful is a universal human constant. But the materials chosen, the recipes developed, and the fires stoked, those are the unique signatures of place, culture, and environment. Residue analysis gives each of these signatures a voice, allowing us to hear a global chorus of innovation, where every civilization contributed its own distinct verse to the enduring song of human making. The quiet dust of history holds a voice more eloquent than any written chronicle. Our journey through the microscopic world of material residues reveals a profound truth, that the grand narratives of ancient art are written in the smallest of details. We have seen how a single pigment particle can map a trade route spanning continents, and how the faintest trace of beeswax can summon the heat and urgency of a bronze foundry. These are not just scientific curiosities, they are the recovered memories of human ingenuity. From the chemical signature of a rare blue to the unique, where pattern left by a specific stone tool, these silent witnesses have allowed us to perform a kind of temporal archaeology. We are no longer limited to studying the finished monument. We can now reconstruct the lost workshop around it, hear the quiet conversations between artisan and material, and revive the precise, forgotten techniques that brought stone, metal, and pigment to life. Most importantly, this science reconnects us with the skilled hands of the past on a deeply personal level. We are not just learning about a culture, we are learning from the individuals within it, recognizing their problem-solving, their aesthetic choices, and the sheer physicality of their craft. This powerful fusion of archaeology and cutting-edge science does far more than just answer our old questions. It fundamentally transforms them, opening doors we never knew existed and continually deepening our sense of wonder. Every answered query spawns a dozen new ones. Knowing the composition of Egyptian blue leads us to ask, how did that recipe travel? Who carried it? Did local artisans adapt it with their own materials? Identifying a Toolmark invites us to consider the apprenticeship behind that steady hand, the years of practice required to achieve such control. The science provides the hard data, the undeniable facts written in atoms and molecules. But in doing so, it restores the mystery and complexity of the past, reminding us that every artifact is the endpoint of a vast, interconnected web of knowledge, resources, and human relationships. It turns our museums from halls of static objects into dynamic spaces of ongoing investigation, where the story is never truly finished. As we close this exploration, carry forward a simple but transformative idea. Every ancient object you will ever encounter in a museum, from the most majestic statue to the humblest clay pot, is a palimpsest. It is a surface layered with hidden stories, each generation of its life from creation to use to burial, leaving a faint but readable imprint. For centuries, we could only read the topmost layer, the final form. Now we have begun to acquire the keys, the scientific lenses, to unlock the strata beneath. We can read the diary of its making and the long conversation it has had with time itself. This perspective changes everything. It asks us to look closer, to wonder not just at what something is, but at all the journeys, decisions, and hands that made it possible. If this journey into the very fabric of history has captivated you, consider subscribing. We delve into many more mysteries of our shared past, seeking the stories written in stone, script, and now in silent molecules. And we would love to hear your thoughts. Which ancient artistic process do you find most astonishing? Is it the fiery alchemy of bronze casting, the vibrant chemistry of fresco, or the global journey of a single color? Share in the comments below and let us continue this conversation across the centuries.